Good evening, or afternoon, I should say, everyone, and welcome to this fantastic event. It's so lovely to see you all filing in now to the stage. For those of you that are in reception, make your way to the stage now. We're going to just have a couple of seconds while we let people just file in before I get started with the presentation for this evening, and we get started kicking off with those discussions, which I know you're all so eager to get going with. So thank you so much for that. Wonderful. So I am going to kick off and get us started. And just introduce myself a little bit first, and I'll go on to a little bit more about myself in a moment. So my name is Victoria Bagnall, and I'm one of the co-founders of this event and your host today. Before we get started, I would like to show you around the platform. So if you have a look at the left-hand side, you'll see that there are some chats and polls and Q&As on the stage. And so we'd love for you to use those. The polls we're not going to use this evening, but the chat, we would love for you to put in there anything that comes to mind to kind of contribute towards what we're saying or what you're hearing on the stage. And with the Q&A, that's for the event organisers. So anything practical, like you can't get into your session or anything like that, pop it in the Q&A and we will happily help you out. And then you've also got the stage as well. On the left-hand side, you've got the navigation. So getting around, you've got the stage and you've got the different sessions that you're going to be going into. So at 5 o'clock, we're going to be putting you into the sessions. So we will finish this presentation on the stage at 5 and you'll be going into your sessions until about 5:45. Then you'll be coming back to the stage again for the wrap-up and summary of the event. So if you get stuck at any time, please do type into the Q&A and we will come to your rescue. And for those of you on Twitter or LinkedIn, we encourage you to live tweet during this event. Our handle should be in the chats, but it's at Forum for the Fute2, and our event hashtag is Our Chance to Be Heard. Thank you so much for that. So, for those of you who haven't met me yet, and I've spoken to many of you on the phone over the past few weeks, I run an organisation called Connections in Mind. We are a group of dedicated people committed to raising awareness about core brain functions in self-regulated learning and in everyday life, our executive functions. We work with children and adults who have been traumatised by the current system and seek change, which allows all children to flourish. I want to start by thanking you all from the bottom of my heart for attending today's Forum for the Future of Education. This last 18 months has been incredibly hard for everyone working in education. And given that, I want to acknowledge the effort that it has taken for you all to attend today. The purpose of today's event is to catalyse change. Back in April, we sensed an overwhelming groundswell of frustration towards the current education system. And we wanted to harness the power of that emotion to ignite a movement which delivers real change. The focus of this event is hearing from you. To ignite the conversation and kick things off, you will first hear from 4 key stakeholders within education through a range of mediums, including poetry and rap. Then, before you head off into your discussion groups, we will show you a mashup video of opinions about education now and dreams for education in the future. We hope that you will also complete a poll of 4 simple questions before you get started on the discussion. Also, just a quick note to say that during the event, Zahura Plummer, a live scribe, will be making a visual representation of the event for us. She may pop into your discussion group, so don't be surprised if she comes in and she'll be clearly labelled in your groups. Finally, I ask that you all give this event your undivided attention. So close down your email, switch off your phone, and immerse yourself in the important work we are here to do. Generations of children will be grateful that you did. It is with great pleasure that I hand over to 2 of our co-founders, Julia Harrington, Headmistress of Queen Anne School and CEO of Brain Can Do, and Sarah Fletcher, High Mistress of St Paul's Girls' School, to introduce our first two speakers. Julia, over to you.
Thank you very much, Victoria. And without further ado, it's my great pleasure to introduce the wonderful Jeff Barton, General Secretary of ASCL, the Association of School and College Leaders, to the stage to speak to us about the urgent need for change. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you very much, Julia, and great to see you all. And I start predictably with a quotation, Franklin D. Roosevelt. We cannot always build a future for our youth, but we can build our youth for their future. And this feels like it's a moment, doesn't it? We've had a microscope held up to our education system, and we've seen it warts and all. So what I want to do, just in trying to harness your enthusiasm, your idealism, your optimism, is also to remind us to be politically savvy. Let's have as our starting point that our education system in the UK is a good education system, but it's not good enough for everyone. And that's best crystallized by a story you may have heard me say before, which was talking to the schools minister, saying, what do you think it feels like, Mr. Gibb, to get a grade 3 at GCSE after you've had your early years, your primary teachers, your secondary teachers, you come in to get and hold up your GCSE certificates? What does it feel like to get a grade 3? And he said, why do you fixate on a grade 3? And I said, because you fixate on a grade 4. You call a grade 4 a standard pass, you call a grade 5 a good pass. So what does that make a grade 3? To which he responded, having looked slightly abashed to one of his policy advisors, presumably it's a good fail. We have to do better than that. And what I would suggest we do is to recognize that at its best, what you've got is great stuff that happens in the room, supported by great stuff that happens around the classroom, all that stuff that builds your resilience, your character, that helps you to do better within your examinations, but isn't just judging you by whether you're a grade 3, because that child with the grade 3 will be consigned not to be able to go into certain careers and will be consigned to a hamster wheel of endless resits in literacy and numeracy. So what I would suggest is choose the things that will make the difference, particularly on the watch of a government that talks rhetorically rather too much about levelling up. And it might just be that there are 3 particular things around that. That maybe what we've allowed our education system to do is to become too narrow, that we've allowed it to become driven by metrics, that this should be about the dignity of head, hand and heart. Because if the COVID epidemic has shown us anything, it's we rely on people who perhaps didn't see themselves as the, quote, cognitive elite. But we need more people who can show the hand and the heart as well as the head. So what does that look like? And that's where we want to paint a picture of what that could be like and bring those young people to feel the dignity of achievement. Might be one thing. Secondly, there's too much obsession with qualifications, don't you think, particularly around GCSE, designed in a different era when some young people were leaving school at that point. Well, they're not now. Can we not have a focus on destinations? What do they need to be able to move on to the next stage of their life, rather than this obsession with a qualification at 16? What does that look like in person? How would we take the public with us who've been looking in from outside, seeing education in a new light? That's our moment, I think, to tell a story beyond the clanging echo chamber of education. And thirdly, you'll know as well as I do that in the real world out there, whether it's online retail or going to see a doctor at a hospital or whatever it might be, we use technology in extraordinary ways, except in education. In education, it's time for the technology to do some of that heavy lifting. It could give you as a child better feedback than me as your English teacher, allowing me as a human being to do things which the robots can't do. Isn't it time really to start embracing the potential of technology and in the process to make teaching the 21st century profession that every young person would think, that's what I want to do when I'm older? So we take the idealism that we all come to, we take the opportunity of having looked in at an education system, warts and all, and seeing its good bits and the bits we can improve. And now it's over to you to help articulate what that might look like in practice. And let me now hand over to the High Mistress of St Paul's Girls' School, Sarah Fletcher.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you so much for those wonderful insights. Next up, we have Kieran Mayhill, who's assistant head teacher, activist and mother, who's going to speak to us about her Roadmap to Renewal initiative, which she is doing in collaboration with Big Education. Kieran, over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everybody. I'm Kieran. I'm a mum, an educator and an activist, and I come wearing all of those hats this afternoon to advocate for the well-being and welfare of our children and young people. Now, my proposition is that welfare and well-being should be the foundation of how schools respond to the blowback from COVID-19. This, I believe, will renew education for the times that we now live and learn in. Now, it's not a new position for me. About a year ago, a colleague and I were trying to map out what a successful return from lockdown would look like in our schools. We were frustrated that DfE guidance seemed to exclusively focus on safety and COVID-secure environments. And what we were noticing in our settings was there's a lot of talk about lost learning and a catch-up curriculum. Now, yes, of course, safety is important. Yes, learning is important. But so too is the welfare and well-being of our school communities. So to help guide us, we imagined kind of three intertwined pillars which would shape our response to the pandemic. We would reset for safety, we would recover welfare and well-being, and we would rebuild learning. And it's the combination of those three that would act as a roadmap for renewal in our schools. Now, we shared this thinking with many school leaders as there was appetite for guidance and collaboration. But there was also a palpable feeling that leadership in that moment meant stepping up in service of our young people and families. So what have we done in my school? Well, student reintegration was deliberately designed to focus on both wellbeing and learning. So following both lockdowns, our tutor teams delivered pastoral care sessions where safety information was communicated, but space was provided to openly discuss wellbeing. And there was an explicit teaching of metacognition, so students were kind of reintroduced to learning in a school environment. We now have a safe space provision that students self-refer to in order to work with our wellbeing practitioner. Our breakfast club is open every day and free for all students to attend. And we have encouraged lessons to take place outdoors, if possible and practicable, because we appreciate the restorative power of nature. To combat some of our students being on mute for much of remote learning, purposeful classroom talk has become a strategic priority for the school. And we did actively build in screen-free activities during that second lockdown, so both staff and students could stay active and creative whilst learning from home. Now, we didn't have to wait for the evidence to show that family finances would be hit, that mental health would be strained. The evidence, of course, now does show this. 420,000 more children are now eligible for free school meals since schools first closed their gates in March 2020. And an NHS study has suggested that children and young people with a probable mental disorder were more likely to say that lockdown had made their lives worse. Now, schools that have been rooted in their communities knew this. We've adapted this year and we've risen to the challenge as best we can. But we're not magicians. If we value this work, we need to invest in it. And contrary to what some may think about education, most leaders I know want the very best for every child and young person, regardless of what school they attend. Now, we need a national guarantee, not a postcode lottery. We're not there yet, but there are reasons to be cheerful. The wellbeing and welfare of children is being prioritised in some schools. Oak National Academy has recently started to develop a bank of wellbeing resources. It's one of the first things actually that parents ask of us as teachers, inquire about, and I do too as a parent. And it has risen up the public priority list. In a first poll to capture the view of the British public on what rebuilding after the pandemic might mean, Queen Mary academics revealed that in relation to schools, support for people's mental health and well-being was the most popular policy priority. So why is it not a bigger part of the Department for Education's response? Now, I think if we want welfare and well-being of our children to matter more, then we need to be clear about why, what that looks like, and then how do we make that happen? As a parent and a professional, I believe we owe it to this generation of young people who've already sacrificed so much. But as a patriot too, the long-term future success of our country does depend on well-being and welfare being the foundation on which all else will be built. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kieran. I could not agree. Well-being and welfare are the foundations of human development. We cannot skimp on these and expect children to flourish. When we were putting together this event, we agreed that it was essential to also hear from students or people who had been through the system very recently. And I am delighted to be able to introduce two young people whose stories of being let down by the system draw a tear to my eye every time. Sadder still, these stories are all too common. First up is Nia Modley, a brave young woman using her skill and talent as a poet to call for change in the system. Nia will recite her poem, Change for the Better.
Change for the better. I think most of the time half the healing is in talking, in being open and vulnerable and falling. It's in hearing the stories of those who didn't give up and give in to the voice that tortured them, full of self-hatred, forcing them to be thin. So I share this for the one that feels helpless, lost and alone, who's fallen victim to their head that's hijacked their home. They're stuck in a system that fails to support their needs and as a result is left on their knees. You see, I tore myself down, abandoned it all until I was nothing but my body, and with that came a life so small. But when life got beyond me, I wanted to take hold of the reins, and my body was the one thing that I could change. With anorexia came awe and bulimia, disgust. Most waking moments I felt I could combust. Pain and horror for all involved. How wrong was I that with a thinner body I thought this would all be solved? But the truth was, it was never about my body. At times so small, other times far heavier. Instead about self-destruction and the terror that came with growing up. It was my coping mechanism and way to survive, and in a very warped way, the thing that kept me alive. It numbed the painful feelings, helping me to endure the things that felt too much. Became my best friend and my crutch. But it stopped working and I couldn't stop it. And I realized somewhere deep down in my heart that it had gone a lot further than I meant at the start. I'd got a new mind and I was not in control. My head told me things and I was stuck in a hole. I would try to do things differently, but the guilt that came with these moments of weakness would not be for six. My head, my biggest enemy. People questioned why I chose to become a skeleton, why I chose to act in this way. But it was never a choice. I didn't choose to fall victim to anorexia or bulimia, but recovery was my choice. When I listened quietly enough, there was a brave voice inside of me that was so determined to see the back of this ED. My recovery journey was far from straightforward, met with many a stray off plan. There were years of accumulated weigh-ins, therapy, support group tests, and scans, used by professionals to determine my health and me to determine my worth. There was a lot of unlearning, blind faith and fear, but a day at a time, glimmers of my personality began to reappear. In my experience, the really gritty, mundane, life-changing work went on in therapy. The sharing and opening and being vulnerable despite not quite being ready. But with the hard work came so much joy and freedom and a simple life that I, for one, will never take for granted, given the strife that existed in my head, that convinced me I would be better off dead. And I can say it has all been worth it. Today I can step on a scale and it doesn't say anything about me. And I can eat a meal and it doesn't say anything about me either. And I can consume a pint of ice cream without having to have earned it. Life has just got easier bit by bit. And don't get me wrong, difficulty still arises. But I've learned none of it can be solved by changing my diet. For me, some days, the only thing stopping me from a relapse is knowing that it's impossible to change the world on an empty stomach. And so I try to do the next right thing, holding on to hope and courage. I sometimes look back and wish I had found better support at school, for perhaps it wouldn't have got quite so bad and I wouldn't have lost it all. I wouldn't have been forced to leave school without my A-levels. Perhaps a better environment in which I felt more settled would have prevented me from getting so sick. Perhaps in taking a little focus away from English, science, and arithmetic, not only me, but every child suffering with their mental health could be given the tools to arm them with greater strength. You see, there are children in every corner of the world going to school trying to hide their risks, with voices in their heads that just persist. A multitude of kids facing mental health illnesses that are more subtle. Anxiety, comparison, sadness, just a daily struggle to find acceptance and happiness inside. It's everywhere. We are everywhere. 1 in 4, probably more. So why does this stigma still exist? And why do people still feel quite so alone? Why can't I freely say that those struggles that I face, the ones that can't be shown, have turned my life and those around me upside down, but have given me a strength and a courage, and I now have a way around them? Today, I urge you to give a voice to those things that we are all too quick to cover. Because if we don't, where will that get us? An only worsening situation that in years we will discuss, why did we not act? Let us come together as schools and communities and use what we have to make a change for the better. Thank you.
Wow, what a powerful piece of writing, Nia, and so passionately delivered. Thank you for sharing your story with us today and speaking up for change. Next up is Jay Grange. Jay's story is also... Jay was expelled from a number of schools and also nearly ended up being expelled from his pupil referral unit, being told that he would inevitably end up in prison. It wasn't until he left school and sought psychological support that he was diagnosed with ADHD, and since then he's turned his life around. Jay's song, We Will Rise, featuring the London Community Gospel Choir, will be released this summer. His is a story of adversity, evolving into hope. This is not just a wonderful piece of music. Please listen carefully to his lyrics. I don't know about you, but I have goosebumps every time I listen to this rap. In fact, I've been listening to it a lot while I've been preparing for this event. My favorite line is, "What's the point of fitting in? I was born to stand out." Jay, I know you're here with us today, and I commend you and your courage. We will rise up and we will achieve the change that we need. Okay. So hopefully you're all feeling reminded of why we need to change the system, having heard from key stakeholders calling for change. Before we get into the discussions, we're going to show you a mashup of ordinary stakeholders in education who contributed to our 3 words video wall. They will describe the current system in their own words and then go on to describe their dream for the future of education. Here we go.
We cram knowledge into young people's heads so that they can regurgitate it in exams, probably forgetting most of it the next day. We have no focus on true human skills of understanding who they are, no real preparation for work and life.
It's an inappropriate education system. It's not looking to prepare young people for the challenges they're going to face as young adults, not preparing them to make sure that they are happy, balanced and successful, comfortable in their own skins.
And the reality is 1 in 10 children currently have a clinically diagnosable mental health problem. Look, it's a complex issue, but what can cause a real loss of self-esteem is the unhealthy emphasis on academic attainment as the only measure of success. It's not correct and it's outdated.
Many children today will do jobs that we haven't yet heard of. We need to teach flexibility in children so that they are not daunted by change.
Because these young people are losing the motivation and inspiration in enjoying learning, because a lot of what they are learning is just irrelevant.
Stretched physically and financially, and it's very clear for us all to see.
Although there's a huge hunger and so many inspired individuals and organisations trying to influence and change the way education is delivered, the current education system is far too slow to adapt.
And I chose this word because no one really knows the best way to change things, and it's such a big system to try and fix. But if we can all do one little thing each day to move forward, then we're going to have some more clarity.
There's no reason why our education system can't be just like the rest of industry and the tech. We can be looking forward, dynamic and moving ahead with the times, looking to change and develop.
I dream of working conditions that would actually allow more time for teachers to develop their own pedagogical practice, to have more of a dialogue with each other, share good practice, and that would truly impact the kind of education on offer for our young people. We need more of that.
This means that students should feel safe and empowered in their learning. This requires that they be both recognised for their entire lived experience and not just their capabilities in the classroom.
We need holistic development in our curriculum. It means we recognise all the skills, all the subjects, and we value them equally so that the children can grow across all genres of school life.
Let's have a system that allows young people to be proud of who they are, to explore their own passions and purpose, and to never lose sight of their own wonderful quirkiness, character traits, and approach.
We need to create atmosphere that enables our children who are creative to be curious, to explore, to play, and to invent things.
So just like the unseen roots of a tree or its life source, we should nurture our children's futures by listening to their voice, and each of us play our part in growing a better system to reflect what society really needs.
Because I believe through schools being a forum for parent education, and by really working on that school-parent partnership, I believe together we can create a society of more empathetic children. And here's the thing, emotional intelligence, it's at the heart of leading a successful life, and is more important than IQ.
Thank you all for your attention. Now it's time to hear from you. As you know, the input from this event will be analysed by a team of researchers led by Professor Kerry Facer. Kerry helped me to design the questions for this afternoon, and she asked that we start with a very short poll. So if you wouldn't mind going to, sorry, I've just got to get it up on my screen here now. If you wouldn't mind going to menti.com. So if you can type in menti.com into your browser, please, everybody. And then, let me just get the slide up so you can see. If you can go then to type in the code 2958693. So that's 2958693. And then there'll be a couple of questions for you to ask, actually 4 questions for you to answer. If anyone's having any problems with that, I'm sure that the event organisers will help you. So go to menti.com, type in 2958693, and then we will get your answers and we will look at them after the discussions. In a moment, I will direct you to go to your sessions. Once you're there, your moderator or safeguarding lead for students will be in charge of the session. You were already sent instructions on how to conduct these sessions, but the guidelines will be in the session under the picture on the right-hand side. And for ease of reference, just let me clarify the points now. So please spend the first 5 minutes getting to know each other, and then split your time, which will be just less than 20 minutes for each discussion. And you'll be discussing these questions. What do we need to do to create the education system we want? What resources, talents, assets, and networks do we have to help us do this? Those 2 questions. So for each question, if you spend the first 2 minutes just typing your ideas in the chat before you get started with the discussion, this can help to make sure that everyone gets a chance to contribute. Remember, all the sessions will also be recorded and transcribed, so you don't need to write down everything in the chat. And remember that also Chatham House rules apply. We have three simple ground rules really for these discussions. Firstly, step up. Secondly, step back. And thirdly, stay on topic. But in summary, please make sure that everyone gets a chance to contribute and that you keep to the questions asked. Okay, so we're nearly ready to go to the sessions. Please click on the link on the right-hand side that says sessions, and then click on your session to enter. And welcome back from your discussions. I hope you found that as stimulating as we did. And it was so lovely to pop into some of those and see you busy discussing what we can do to change education for the better. And I'm so excited to start picking out the themes and key quotes so that we can start building that white paper together. So thank you so much for your time. So I just want to spend some time now just reviewing the polls that we did earlier. Thank you to everyone who filled those out. That's really helpful for us to use as part of our research. So hopefully you can see this now. There we go. It's just come up. So we've got, what should the purpose of education be? So there's some lovely quotes that we've got coming up from everybody here, and we can scroll down. There's an awful lot here because all of you contributing to this. But really the kind of essence of it was that it should be inspiring. Should be inspiring young people and helping them to build themselves up to be the best that they can be for their futures. So we'll really get into the nitty-gritty of that as we go through the analysis. But let's take a look now at the next slide, if it will let me move on. It was working just a second ago. Here we go. Here we are. It's just loading up. Oh, let's move done 2 now. Hang on a second. Here we go. So this was, how does the education system meet the needs of young people? So not really. And you look at the shape of that curve, that actually the majority of the EU said between kind of not at all and for the minority of people, not definitely for the majority or for all young people. And what we really want, isn't it, is a system that meets the needs of all young people. And then moving on to the word clouds now, how do we feel about the current education system? Some really strong emotions coming out now. We feel sad, we feel it's outdated, we feel disappointed by it, we feel frustrated, we feel disillusioned. So many powerful emotions that we're feeling about the current education system and our desire for changing it. And finally, just looking at the future of education, and just look at the difference in the type of words that we're using to describe these now. We're thinking about being excited. That's the biggest one to come out. Isn't that wonderful? That energy, positive, passionate, hopeful, inspired, good, intrigued, motivated. So that's so wonderful. And I hope that you, like me, will take lots of inspiration from that and be really energized by this preliminary results. We'll share the details of them with you in the follow-up email tomorrow, and I can't wait to delve deeper into the detail over the coming weeks. We will send you all the white paper by the end of the summer, which details Professor Kerry Face's analysis of your contributions and recommendations to mobilize us all for change. In a moment, we'll wrap up the event and talk about what we need to do. But in the meantime, let's hear from Zahura Plummer, our live scribe for the event, about what she's drawn to summarize our work so far. So thank you, Zahura, and over to you.
Hello, everybody. So thanks so much for having me at a really fascinating conversation. So I drew I was listening very carefully to what you guys were saying, and I was drawing it while you were saying it. So I'll just talk you through all the amazing things that I heard. So there was a lot about too much emphasis on qualifications and not enough on destination. That was something that Jeff said, but it also came up again in the session that I was in. So this idea of having no exams at 16 and but then there was lots of students had questions about how would that work and like practically what would happen to the applications. There was also Kieran's setting out the pillars of returning here. So I really like this idea of purposeful classroom chat to get people talking again after all that time of being on mute at home, and learning about how to learn. So learning about metacognition. So we've got brain down there, but definitely that it needs to be resourced properly, because teachers are not magicians and they can't do everything. And then there was lots in my group about divergency, and more accommodation for that. So I drew all these different coloured dots and kind of overlapping in slightly imperfect and wonderful ways. So there was some stuff in my session about sharing knowledge between schools, and there's some more bits that I'm going to fill in around there in that white space. The importance of a really wide curriculum came out really strongly in my group. So we've got here sports and science and maths and art, and there's loads more that I'm going to add around there, so I'll make a big circle. I really liked this quote from Nia about it's impossible to change the world on an empty stomach. That's definitely true, and especially the amount I know and how much I eat. And so overall, this picture will be available for you guys after the event. I'm going to fill in a little bit of that white space, but it should be a kind of overall general reflection and interpretation of what went on today. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Zahura. That's so wonderful. And I do love your work. For a neurodiverse person like myself, I really struggle to digest reams and reams of text in reports for these events. So having your work is so powerful in terms of just visually summarizing what's gone on in the event. So thank you so much for that. We'll be sending it out tomorrow in the follow-up email. So take a look out for that. And Zahura, I think you're going to be adding to it before we send it out, aren't you? So it'll be fuller then with more details of what went on in the event. So thank you so much. And if I could ask you to leave, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. Okay, gosh, I can't believe we're already at the end of this event. So many people have poured their heart and soul into preparing for this event over the last few weeks, and it would be impossible to mention them all. Our associate organisations, especially HMC and our sponsor AMS, need a special mention, as well as Dr. Sebastian Schepler, who helped coordinate the funding for people who would otherwise not be able to attend. Not to mention our event team at Connections in Mind, who have worked tirelessly to encourage you all to sign up and make sure it runs as smoothly as possible. All that remains is for me to rally you all for change. What we've done today is just the start. You have made a stand to call for reform to the education system. You have voiced your opinions on how we can make it happen, and we have taken the first step on our journey, and there is no looking back now. Education is full of voices calling for change, many of whom support us in our efforts today. A cacophony of passionate voices shouting as loudly as they can from different corners of the profession, from different perspectives, and with different agendas. From the outside, people hear a calamitous noise, which is impossible to make sense of or follow. What we need is a harmonious chorus of voices working in unison for change. This is the only way that we will reform that future generations deserve. Our theory of change is based on the work of Duncan Green in his excellent book, How Change Happens. Change comes from the people, and critical junctures in history can galvanize people to overcome their differences. Once this happens, it opens up the opportunity to rise against the powers which thrive on our compliance. With the COVID crisis, we have reached a critical juncture. This global shock has pulled back the facade of our education system and exposed the broken, damaging, and irrelevant underbelly of the system. A system which was designed in the 1800s and has not evolved with the times. It is no longer enough to tweak the elements of the system. The whole system needs to be redesigned to meet the needs of the people it's supposed to serve. We have a rare opportunity for real change, and we must not let it slip through our fingers. At this moment, we don't have all of the answers. They will come from education experts and from more consultations like these with key stakeholders and also from systems designers. However, I do believe that all those calling for change can work together. We can separate education from politics and devise a system based in science and practical application. A system which can evolve with the ever-changing world we live in. A system which truly serves the needs of young people. What we're talking about here will not be easy. There are people and powers invested in holding on to the old paradigm, and we must learn to put aside our ego and listen to others in order to be true to the work at hand. There will be times when we feel it's all too much, when we feel downtrodden and hopeless, but we must rally each other to keep going and achieve the change that we need. So how do we do that? Where to from here? Well, like I said, change comes from the people. In order to mobilize people, we need change makers like yourselves to invest the time and effort to push forward for change in two key ways. Firstly, to galvanize people for change. Go out and talk to people in your networks and ask them to get involved. Invite them to future events and help them to see that there is hope for change. Get involved in the work for change. This is the second point, sorry. Got carried away with myself. Secondly, get involved in the work for change. We will be working hard over the coming weeks to crunch the data from your discussions, which will feed into one or more white papers. And once we have the results, we will have a clear directive of what we need to do to bring about the change we need. We'll be working with Citizens UK to design a series of events and working groups to put these ideas into action. Future generations are relying on you to get involved. So as this event draws to a close, I ask you to reflect upon today and consider, how will you spread the word and get involved? Tomorrow we will be emailing you with important next steps towards creating the system young people need. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for your time this afternoon. It has been an absolute pleasure working with you in our mission for change. And I know that together we can make change happen. Thank you.